Hey everybody, it's Andrea. Before we start today's show, I have a super quick announcement to share with all of you. Beginning in April, I'm going to be launching a series of college to career live weekend boot camps to help graduating seniors as well as juniors who are confused about what jobs or careers they might want to pursue when they graduate. So imagine going from confused to confident with at least 3 different career options you'd be psyched to explore by the end of day 1 of the boot camp. And then learning the tools, tactics, and the strategies to find those jobs by the end of day 2. The boot camp is live and it's led by me over Zoom. And you can learn more about it at College to Career Academy. That's college, the number 2, career.academy. Or you can just look me up on LinkedIn and check out the featured section of my LinkedIn page. I can't imagine a better graduation gift for the college students in your life. Thanks so much for listening, and I know you're going to enjoy my next incredible guest. Hi there, I'm Andrea Koppel, and it's time for coffee, the podcast where you get to hear firsthand what the jobs and careers that interest you the most are really like. Hey there, Java junkies. Welcome to another episode of T4C. If you're interested in learning more about what it's like to work in the coffee industry, maybe even starting your own coffee business, then this is the episode for you. Because my next guest is the co-founder of Birch Coffee Roaster, which is a New York City-based coffee roaster and chain of cafes offering specialty coffees from around the world. But before I introduce you to Paul Schlader, I want to make sure you've signed up for the Java Junkies Journal. That's T4C's weekly newsletter that comes out bright and early on Monday mornings, and it's got unique firsthand insights into dozens of different careers from the people, the professionals who are actually working in them. And it is super easy to do. Just head over to the Time for Coffee website at time4coffee.org, and the sign-up box is right there. Now, my Sumatra drinking specialty coffee lovers, please grab a mug and take a chug of your favorite caffeinated brew, because it's time for another caffeinated career conversation. And my guest is Paul Schlader, the co-founder of New York City-based specialty coffee roasting and brewing Birch Coffee. Paul is one of those aspiring entrepreneurs who'd known pretty much from the time he was a little guy that this is what he wanted to do, to start a business. But his parents had another idea for him, and they encouraged him. They coaxed him into going to college and enrolling in another interest he had, which is acting. And so Paul enrolled in the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. And like so many other aspiring actors, Paul continued working in restaurants to pay the bills after graduation. But unlike his theater peers, Paul actually preferred the hustle of hospitality to the bustle and bright lights of Broadway. And it was the smell of freshly roasted organic Sidamo coffee that opened Paul's eyes to the fact that maybe there was another profession that would be interesting to him. So when his buddy Jeremy Lyman said he was thinking about starting a specialty coffee company from the ground up, Paul's response, I'm in. And today he oversees all of Birch's green coffee purchasing, that's buying from farms all over the world, at a minimum Q grade of 84. Specialty coffee starts at 80. We wonk out on all this, my friends, so stay tuned. In 2015, Birch opened a 4,000 square foot roasting plant where Paul roasts all of their coffees in small batches. Prior to the coronavirus hitting New York City, and as it hit cities all over the US and around the world in March of 2020, Birch had actually expanded to 13 shops and had more than 90 employees It's since had to scale back. And as of this interview, which we did towards the end of September 2020, Birch has 7 cafes open all across New York. And it has a continued ongoing commitment to raising awareness for specialty coffee as an industry. This is a real life story, my friends, of grit and resilience in action. And boy, does Paul open up.
Paul, welcome to Time for Coffee. Are you caffeinated and ready to go?
Andrea, I am caffeinated and I'm ready to go. Let's go.
Awesome. Yes. So I have to ask you, because come on, co-founder of Birch Coffee.
Yes.
What have you been brewing up recently? What's your favorite? I know you said cold brew has been kind of your go-to, but when you're kind of hankering for a hot coffee, what's your favorite?
That's a fair question. And actually, I know for certain you've heard this before because I've heard interviews where you've heard this before. But asking a coffee person which coffee is their favorite is like asking, so which child is the best one? Which one would you like? And that's very much the case. Depending on the time of day, I will gravitate towards a Brazil, something from our partners in Carmo Geminis. I will have a coffee there in the morning just because it's balanced, low acidity, very easy to drink, still with some complexity. And in the afternoon, I like to have a Yirgacheffe coffee from Ethiopia just because bright, acidic, floral, fruity, much more complex and a lot brighter. And I like brighter coffees later in the day.
Yeah. And honestly, I have no idea how that translates to taste, but we can probably touch on that later in the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to.
Before we get into what you do as a roaster extraordinaire, I thought it might be useful for our viewers and our listeners to get a better sense of what Birch Coffee is. What is it for those who haven't been to New York City, haven't tried a Birch Coffee? I know that you are actually online so people can order it, but what sets Birch Coffee, especially your cafes, apart from the bazillion other coffee institutions, coffee cafes that are all over the city?
Our commitment to service and to getting your order correct 100% of the time. I like to to set the table this way. When you go to a restaurant, right, and you order a meal, ordinarily you're given a menu. No matter the restaurant, you're given a menu, your order is taken, food is brought, you eat your food, the food is removed, and you pay and then you leave, right? There's to be some conversation with an individual, perhaps in that space. I'm going to make an assumption that what defines the best place that you've eaten at from the worst place that you've eaten at is the level of service within that space, right? So for us, making sure that you are taken care of 100% of the time that's the goal. And if that doesn't happen, then we haven't done our job. So that is the key definer with us.
And what about the vibe in a Birch coffee shop?
So as you would see in the majority of coffee shops, there's a focus on great music. There is a focus on, music that sets the tone for what's happening in that space. And if it's raining, we'll have on specific music. If it's, bright, we'll have on specific music. So that being one element of it. And then there will be someone smiling, greeting you when you walk in. And again, 100% of the time, that will be the case when you're coming into our stores or we haven't done our job.
That is beautiful. That is wonderful. I love it. What was it about coffee, Paul, that attracted you and Jeremy into this space? Like, why wasn't it bagels or a bakery? I know that you went to a coffee convention in DC called Coffee Fest that kind of rocked your world, but you were already kind of moving in that direction.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy had been working on a coffee shop concept for some period of time. And he was digging in, wanted to make it happen. I I was looking to start a business, and it didn't really matter to me what that was. I wanted to be a part of something bigger than what I was doing. And, I remember going up to Jeremy, and I kind of like to make this, to kind of draw this parallel. When you're a kid and you have a friend that's going to go to the beach, but you really want to go to the beach, you go, hey, can I go to the beach with you? That's kind of what I did with Jeremy. He said, you're starting a business? Hey, would you like someone to start a business with you? And he was kind enough to completely say, nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Right. He kind of blew you off.
First few times, it's like, nah, he's like, I got this. And then one day that shifted. And then we just started, digging in, further together. Coffee specifically was interesting because I had recently started going to a small coffee chain in New York City, and I had never had specialty coffee before, and I had it there, and it was fantastic. And I wanted more of that, and I wanted to be a part of that. And then, as you said, going to DC, the kind of the white light or the aha moment was getting an Ethiopian Amaro Gallo served on I don't know if you've ever seen, Starbucks bought the patent to these, and then they have them in all of their stores. And it's called a Clover, and it's a single cup brewer, but it's like the size of a desk. It's really large, and it makes no sense economically for like small businesses. But I had this Amaro Gallo served on this Clover, and it was hands down the best cup of coffee that I had to that period of time. And that was it. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to understand why this tastes so good, and I want to do this better. And that's it. This is what I want to do. And that was it for me. I was off to the races, and I could not get that out of my head.
What about a specialty coffee? We hear that term thrown around.
Yeah.
What is a specialty coffee? What makes a particular coffee? I was about to call it a bean, and it's not a bean. It's the coffee fruit.
Yeah. A fruit and then the seed inside the fruit, right?
Right.
So yeah, you are correct. And as I'm sure you're aware, so there are Q graders, which are the coffee equivalent to a sommelier, right? And a Q grader will be able to establish a coffee that is a specialty grade or a non-specialty grade. And a specialty grade starts at a score of 80. Everything 80 and above, specialty grade coffee. So if we're getting into like the minutia of this, that is technically what would make a specialty store is a store that is purchasing that level of coffee, right? Coffees that are a much higher caliber than what you would say you'd find in most grocery store aisles.
And I'm so glad you brought up the grocery store aisle, because I admit it, I used to drink the kind of coffee that you used a can opener to break the seal, and you just put whatever 8 scoops of it in, pour water, and you drink this black stuff. What is the difference between that and what you roast at your roastery at Birch Coffees? I think your facility is like 1,400 square feet or something like that. I think you're.
Yep. It's a big space, and
4,000 square feet. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And so going back to the grade, so most of the coffee that's in the tin can. So you have 2 different genus of coffee, right? So you have Arabica and Robusta. So Robusta is a inexpensive, requires much less maintenance as far as the trees are concerned. And that is grown at lower elevations. It requires much less fuss and produces a lot of coffee. Arabicas are the opposite. They require a great deal of attention. They have to be grown at higher elevation, and they grow a smaller yield. So you have these kind of 2 competing varietals. A lot of the coffee that can be used for those cans will be either a blend of Arabica and Robusta or very heavy Robusta, which is, again, a much lower quality of coffee. And the coffees that are, absolutely specialty and are going to be Arabica, period. So those would be your main difference there. And then a step further is we're going to get into, a very fine point of grading within that specialty range. We tend to purchase coffees that fall within and starting at like an 84, which doesn't sound like a giant leap from between an 80 and an 84. But in terms of price and in terms of quality, it very much is.
Got it. So, Paul, could you walk us through the process of roasting coffee? So you get the green beans that have been processed different ways. And then what do you do?
So roasting is, at its core, is you can think of roasting as like a cooking process. So you have 3 stages within roasting. The first stage is going to be drying. And during that drying phase, you're breaking down the coffee, you're removing the moisture that's still within the bean, as you said, the green coffee that it starts. And you begin to pull all of that out, break it down, and then you start to see it heating. The coffee will heat up and change a color. And once it changes color, we're going to be entering the next phase, which is like the yellowing or the mired phase, the sugar browning phase, right? And so at that point, we are beginning the beginning of a cooking stage of the coffee. And then that goes for another, depending on your roaster, that mired phase can last anywhere from 3 to 4 minutes. And then during that period of time, you're going to start building up a lot of energy. Think of popping popcorn. You're building up energy, building up energy, building up energy. Then that energy has nowhere else to go and it explodes. And then we enter the crack and development. So once we get into the first crack, that is when any roaster essentially will be putting their signature on the coffee itself. And it's the last stage before you stop roasting the coffee. And again, it just depends on the type of roaster that you're using, but your finishing time is going to be anywhere from 9 to 13 minutes roughly.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have been inside a roastery. I haven't had the pleasure of visiting your roastery, but I was at one. Gosh, it's about a year ago. I was up in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts, and I went to the Barrington Coffee Roastery, and I took a cupping class, and I was actually the only student. So I had the 2 roasters who gave me a private class, and I just remember seeing the roasting machine and that little clear window glass that you could look through, and it did look like popcorn, and it happened so quickly. And in the meantime, there's that big arm that's kind of moving the coffee around. Yeah, it was super cool. And then of course I got to try the coffee after it had been roasted, and it was just off the charts. You mentioned being a Q grader, and I did listen to another interview you gave, and I was really blown away by the fact that the exam itself to get a certification to be a Q grader is like 6 days long.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the course that you take, but yes, I mean that is what it is. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason behind it, right? And so the main reason behind it is that there's a lot of sensory work, and the level of sensory work that you did, were you to do that all in a day, no one passes because your taste buds are blown out and you have no capacity to evaluate anything after you do your salt, sweet, bitter. It's just like, it's not going to be possible to taste anything else. And so, or you're doing your organic acid test. Like, it's just, there are elements which will just knock you out. Plus you have to do those written things as well. So yeah, it's interestingly an involved process, one that had I known the level of involvement going into it, I don't know that I actually tell people now, it's like when they say, no, I want to be a Q grader, it's like, yeah, you really want to think about that one, because it is not easy and it has a very high fail rate. I remember when I was taking my Q that I called my wife after my first day. I said, so a couple things. 1, 100% going to fail. And 2, I should probably leave this industry. There is no place for me here. in this at all. I mean, I was just crushed emotionally after the first day because it's very challenging. I do know in talking to other Q graders that this is a pretty shared experience that I had during that process. But yeah, it was rough. I did pass, fortunately, but it was it was something to say the least.
Not something you want to go through again.
No, I'm good. I'm fine. There's recertifications you have to do every 3 years, but you don't have to retake the entirety, which is okay with me.
That is incredible. You have to get recertified.
Yeah, but it's more just to calibrate to make sure that you're at your same abilities, right? I mean, because again, you're given the responsibility and you're given the ability to grade specialty coffee. And if I'm sitting down with people saying, well, this coffee is X, and they're saying, well, you're wrong, and we can objectively see why that's the case, then we need to be able to break that down. So there's some level of subjectivity to grading, but most of it is pretty black and white, for lack of a better term.
I know through this whole process, not when you and Jeremy first decided to start a business together, but later, you actually discovered that you have an unbelievable tasting ability. How did that come to your awareness? Was it when you started studying to be a Q grader?
Yeah, it was when I first started cupping coffee with friends at a shop at the time, realizing that I could taste flavor notes. And I was able to identify what was happening, especially as the cup cooled, and being able to identify, acidity in body and being able to quickly understand the difference there. And this is where my business partner guy, he's much more of this tastes good, this doesn't taste good. And he leaves everything else to, as far as nuance is concerned, up to me, which is, it's a great part of our coffee relationship because it's something that he knows he just doesn't have. And it's really great to be able to just to speak to that part specifically, having that kind of lack of ego, really, especially as business owners, helps to kind of break down walls in other areas. So going into it, I'm not good at this is great for us and for our working relationship to know where our strengths and liabilities are.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Now, another thing that you are in charge of, Paul, is the purchasing of Birch's green coffee.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean and what has it involved for you?
That is one of the best parts of what I do. I find such joy and feel such privilege in being able to do it because it allows me to go to countries of origins to work with producers and purchase coffee, which in my very wildest of dreams, I would not have imagined that I would be able to do. And so being able to travel and meet incredible individuals who have a much greater depth of knowledge and are able to help educate me on the practices of best farming and why these are best practices. It's second to none. So I take great pleasure in that part of my job, to say the least.
I am sure. I just recently, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it, interviewed an American guy who got super interested in Nicaragua and in debt relief in school. Did you listen to it?
Oh, yeah.
And
absolutely.
that, Green Mountain coffee growers and just the huge depth of knowledge that these farmers have.
Oh,
because it's been in their family for generations and how much care and pride they put into producing such high grade coffee.
Yep. Absolutely. No, that was a great interview. And I think that what's coming from that, like in part to speak to that interview, was you're seeing this new social dynamic taking place, particularly that's happening, at least that I'm seeing within states, and how we're purchasing coffees is that we're looking much further down the chain to know, where our dollars are having impact and having those kind of difficult conversations, within our industry, because where coffee started, what people were getting paid it's borderline criminal what people were getting paid, that there was such a lack of care to the pickers and the producers. And the fact that the C market is what it is, it's disheartening. And so we purchase coffee differently, knowing where our dollars are being spent and where that impact is being felt in the most positive ways. And because of that, and because of interactions like this, getting the word out, the hope is that there will be this continuation of a conversation around this, because the other interviewee spoke about it's like people should not be paying $2 for a cup of coffee. And in our store, you won't. But, you very much should be paying what you're paying for a glass of wine, a glass of whiskey. I mean, thinking it should be in that same caliber because it requires such effort to produce this coffee. Yeah.
By the way, I need to correct myself. It's Gold Mountain Coffee Growers, not Green Mountain. I'm so sorry about that.
Because I felt like I didn't want to be like correct and be like that kind of guy.
No, but please. Yes. No, I realized it like within seconds of having said it. Okay, Paul, let's flash back very quickly to when you were in college. You attended the American Musical and Dramatic Academy to study theater.
Yes.
Did you know what you were going to do with that degree when you graduated?
Andrea, this is a good question. No, I didn't. The idea of auditioning abhorred me. I had no desire at all to do anything that resembled auditioning. There are people that are bred for that kind of work. I am not one of those people. And I learned that pretty immediately when I got to school. It's like, nope, not for me. This is not going to work. There was a level of encouragement that I had from my family that, this, you should really, I should really dig into this. You should really, pursue this. And the passion for it, for the business side of it, just wasn't there. It just didn't exist. So I hammered my way through the school. It was more out of that it was a sense of obligation, but it was a bit obligatory. So finished and knew that it wasn't really going to go anywhere. So.
Well, I love the way you use the word encouragement. That there was a level of encouragement by your family. It wasn't like pressure or anything like that, Paul. No,
I actually appreciate you asking that, because I'm very happy to discuss that. My family, I very much had I would imagine the opposite of what many performers experience, which is parents going, you shouldn't do this. This is a bad idea. We can talk about something that I did have that experience with a little bit later, but it wasn't performing. And I think that's very interesting. My parents were wholly encouraging that I should pursue this. They were gung-ho, you should do this. And so it was this feeling of, oh my goodness, I don't want to let people down. I want people to be, to have, pride in what I'm, trying to do. So I mustered through it. And, I certainly don't regret doing it. The experience that I gained from it helped me to better be able to have these conversations, being able to stand still on a stage and speak is something that I use often when I'm speaking to our team at a large event. So there absolutely were things that are invaluable gains that I got from it, just not in the way that I had thought.
Absolutely. And actually, you anticipated what my next question was going to be, and you already answered it, which is awesome. No, it is awesome, because I didn't realize until fairly recently that only 27% of college graduates actually go into a field related to their major. It is far more common. So 75% of us never go into a career in our major. And yet there are really valuable skills that you're learning both in the classroom and, in your case, on the stage, that you're able to bring with you into whatever careers you go into. So I usually ask this question a little bit later, Paul, but considering what's happening right now in the world, we're doing this interview towards the latter part of September 2020. And of course, the coronavirus has affected probably every single state in this country. And New York City, we know, was hit super, super hard. And the question is, if you would share a time in your professional life when you struggled and maybe you even failed. And I ask that question of people at all levels of their career, because I want our young viewers and our young listeners to appreciate that there will be ups and downs in their careers. It just so happens that the coronavirus is something that's affecting all of us here in the United States and around the world at the same time. So I don't know if this is the experience you want to speak to, Paul. I know you also started Birch right in the middle of the 2008-2009 recession, which had to be super challenging. But most importantly, how you persevered, how you are persevering, and a lesson maybe that you're taking away from the process.
There's a lot to unpack there, Andrea. I will tie it into a failure because it is something that I've questioned since, in New York, we were obviously, as you alluded to, that, very much the epicenter of how this pandemic first came into the United States and has since ravaged our country. And, in March, we got on a phone call, my CFO, Jeremy and myself got on a phone call, and, Jesse, our CFO, said, we have to put people on furlough and we have to close the stores. We're going to have to do that. And, Jeremy and I knew that we were going to have to do that. And it very much was laid at that I was going to be the one kind of leading these conversations. It's just something that I'm able to do for better or for worse. I'm able to have these conversations. So I brought everybody onto a FaceTime call and began to let everyone know that we were going to have to close the stores and we were going to be laying people off, putting people on furlough, and that it was for an indefinable period of time. Very much felt like a failure. Very much had that sense that our business is lost and that there won't be a recovery from this. And it was a frightening time. And because of the uncertainty of what was happening and how the pandemic was playing out and just the enormity of the way the infection was moving through the city and people were dying, it was this seeming that we're most likely not going to reopen. So in these moments of what was feeling like failure, to what you had alluded to earlier, Jeremy and I started this in 2009, and we opened our first store, and it was during there were a lot of pink slip parties happening then, and Jeremy and I were talking in the early days of the pandemic of what can we do? How can we be of service? How can we, one, bring in revenue into our store, into it like just our roasting facility now, and how can we be of service? And so we had a discussion about using our truck and bringing it to hospitals and providing coffee for service workers at hospitals. And that's what we did. So we put on a thing on our website where you could click and you could purchase coffee for workers at hospitals. And we sold a lot of coffee, and we were able to fund our truck. And it was mostly led by Jeremy to go to these hospitals. I was all led by Jeremy, going to the hospitals, and he would go set up with another one of our team members we were able to bring back, and they would serve hospital workers for several hours. And there was a sense of connection that was so needed in that moment, because as a city, it was really dark, Andrea. It was a really dark period of time for us. And to see smiles on people's faces when they would sip their coffee, not when they were having their masks on, it was motivating. And it got us digging into, okay, so we can evolve through this. And as a result, when we were seeing that we were going to be able to reopen our stores, but that our business model was going to have to change. And so Jeremy and I discussed how we were going to have to change our structure, our business structure, in order to live in this period of time that we're in now. And as a result, we've evolved our business. We're changing some positions within the organization so that more responsibility is going to be going to our store leads now, which they're wanting, and that's great. So we're very fortunate for the team that we have. And what I'm hopeful for, Andrea, and this is obviously yet to be seen, is that this will allow us to be a better evolved business in the long term, because we saw some areas where we were heavy and should have done things differently, and are now given an opportunity to pivot and change, have discussions with people, and make some moves within our stores that we otherwise wouldn't have done. So I do see something very positive coming from this, but it has taken a great deal of trudging through some mud over the last 7 months to kind of, see that this is will be going in a better direction longer term.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Paul. I'm curious. I know that you're really still in it right now, but if you could kind of pull up and look down on the situation, what do you think a lesson is that our viewers and our listeners can take away from this?
The ability to pivot. I mean, that being one of the bigger ones, because of course we never thought we would be dealing with the pandemic, right? We also didn't think we would ever have 13 stores, which is what we had before we shut down. And so to be able to take the time on something that is not working and being able to refashion it, I think it's a really unique opportunity. And being able to do that with a small business, I am hopeful this will be one of my greater lessons that I'm learning in building this business. Because if we don't get that takeaway, well, then I think that we may have missed a really great opportunity for ourselves.
Well, I think you will. I have faith. I have one other question, and then depending upon how you answer this, I may ask one final question after that, Paul. But if you could go back to college and do it all over again, but based on the wisdom you have now, what advice would you give yourself?
I would listen to my gut, Andrea, because I think that early on, I knew that what I was doing wasn't necessarily going to fulfill me long term. But I want to believe that I was trusting of the process to see that through. So I don't know that I would change anything, because I'm eternally grateful for how everything has evolved, because it absolutely has, very much for a reason. And I don't know that I would change anything. I think that I would like to say to myself to just trust my gut a little bit more. I think that's what I would say. Yeah. So
my final question is, it relates to how your family reacted when you told them what you wanted to do, that you wanted to start a coffee business with your buddy, Jeremy. And I think putting that in the context of what some of our young viewers and listeners are going through right now, who may be in their senior year of college, thinking through what am I going to do now when I graduate? I think kind of wrapping that all together.
Yeah.
Could you share that reaction of your family? And I think it relates very much to trusting your gut, how to shut out the noise.
Yeah. It's interesting. My father, who is one of my fiercest advocates, he was very much opposed to Jeremy and I starting this when we were talking in 2000. He said, "This is what we're going to do." He was like, "Bad idea." And maybe he wasn't as flippant as I just was, but he was not on board and said, "This is not the right time," would strongly advise against this. And I said, "Okay, well, thanks. We're going to do this." And again, to your point, I believed in Jeremy and I believed in myself, because I knew what our objective was. And our objective was to be of service. Our objective was rooted in something bigger than us. And so for that reason, I felt confident that we had a shot to make something happen. And worst case, I would definitely learn and take something away from this. And at best, I'd be able to sit and talk to Andrea Koppel and have a conversation about the things that I've learned. So I knew that there was something that was to be strongly gained by taking that risk. And I firmly believe we made the right call there.
Well, I was going to say, on this note of Arabica roasted Q grade 89.
Let's go to 92. Andrew.
92.
Let's really kick it up there.
Let's just go to 92.
Yeah.
I don't think it could get better than that note to end on. I want to thank you so much, Paul, for your authenticity, your candor, and your generosity for sharing your journey with me and the T4C community. I have no doubt, because of those values that you pointed out there at the end, that Birch Coffee is going to continue to grow and thrive. And we're going to come back and do this conversation again in the next year or two. And you're going to tell me about the awesome new heights that you have hit as a result of this very challenging experience.
I look forward to that, Andrea, very much. Very much look forward to that. Yeah. And thank you for your time. Thank you for having me on. This has been an absolute honor and privilege for me. So thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Time for Coffee, where the professionals in the jobs that most interest you always have time to grab coffee 24/7, no matter where you live. I have one quick favor to ask you. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Time for Coffee. Thanks so much.